Well, hi again, everybody. My name is Greg Anderson, and this is the Good Timekeeping Show with Greg Anderson. And today, I want to talk about this thing right here, an alarm clock radio, the RCR-22 by Sangean. Now, some people not sure how to pronounce this name, Sangean. I won't make fun of the way you pronounce it if you don't make fun of the way I pronounce it. I did see a company video that said it was Sangean, a company based in Taiwan. So I'm going to say Sangean. Okay, of course, the announcer on that video had an English accent, and I'm American, so all bets are off. I'm going to say Sangean. So before I get into the details of this alarm clock radio, I want to talk about alarm clocks in general and how they've changed over the course of, well, the time I've been alive. Now, when I was a child, almost all alarm clocks were kind of the same style as this one here. This is actually one that my in-laws got me when they took a trip to Europe, so not bad there. Mechanical, so on the back here, you can see it's got some knobs. This one is for winding the clock mechanism, and this is for winding the alarm. This one here is for setting the time, and this one is to set the alarm time. This button here actually activates the alarm on or off, and then there's a device inside so that when the alarm rings, it actually kind of pounds on the shell of this, and the metal itself is designed such that it will ring like a bell. So almost all alarms when I was a kid were just like this. So you set the time with this knob here, right? And then this long arm here is the alarm time. So when the hour hand lines up with this, that's when the alarm goes off. So, and it only went in one direction, counterclockwise. So as the time came around and met up with that there, there's your alarm. And let me turn that off. Okay, so almost all alarms were mechanical and were like this. Now, there were some that were electrical, but even the electrical ones were like this. You plug it into the wall, but the basic design and the basic way it worked was still like this. So clocks built in the oven were like this, and alarm clock radios also had a clock similar to this back in the old days, back in the early 70s. But even later on, they were still making clocks like that. Here's one from the 1990s featuring the characters from Pinky and the Brain. And again, it's got the same kind of wind-up mechanism and a very similar way that you set the alarm. Instead of having that extra hand that lines up there, you've got this little window here, and this will allow you to set the hour when the alarm will go off. And there you go. There you go. All right. And speaking of Pinky and the Brain, I know you're saying, Greg, do you happen to have a picture of the actors who did the voices of Pinky and the Brain? And I would say, well, of course I do, don't you? It's, of course, my good friends Rob Paulsen and Maurice LaMarche, not only known for Pinky and the Brain, but things like, Ninja Turtles and a bunch of Disney stuff, Futurama. So great guys. Of course, you got to love them. But I digress. Well, by the late 1970s, digital clocks hit the market, and they were all the rage, really hit with a bang. So this is not a clock radio, but there were clock radios where the clock was very similar to this, and you had the option of waking up to an alarm, which was kind of an obnoxious, loud buzzer, or you could wake up to a radio station. Whatever radio station you had it last set to would be the one you would wake up to if you had it set that way. Now, the big drawback with these is if, the power went out, okay, then the power comes back on and you've lost everything. You have the blinking 12 o'clock and your alarm is also set to 12 o'clock. You're just sunk, So, so they invented the backup battery option in some later models. And with the backup battery, a lot of times you were dealing with what? A 9-volt battery? Oh, come on. Nobody likes 9-volt batteries. I mean, I apologize, Mr. 9-volt battery, but you're strange and you cost a lot of money and people just don't like to hassle with you. So some of the later iterations of this, they replaced the 9-volt battery backup with, maybe a couple of AA or AAA batteries for that backup so that, when the power came back on, the time came back on, the alarm setting was still there, everything was fine. But you still had this problem. Let's say your alarm is set for, 6:15, and it's 6:09, so then your power goes out. And the power goes out for, say, 10 minutes. So it goes off at 6:09, comes back on at 6:19, but you've already passed the alarm time. And so even if you had the backup battery and you didn't lose the alarm information, a lot of times the alarm would not sound if the power came back on after the alarm was supposed to go. So, still working out the glitches in this design, but that's kind of what we had starting from the late 1970s. Oh, but just to be clear, let's say, you'd set it to wake up to some sort of buzzer instead of to the radio. That buzzer could be really loud, really obnoxious. It probably sounded something like this. Oh, what an absolutely terrible sound to wake up to. Or if you had it set to play the radio, let's say that you had the radio set to a very low volume before you went to bed, and when it tried to wake you up at that same low volume, you didn't have a lot of options there. So still some bugs to work out with this type of alarm clock. Another digital clock concept from the 1970s might have looked something like this, where it's got these little flaps that have the time on them, and this turns over every minute to reveal a new minute. So they used to have these, and they were enclosed in a little box, and it was a clock radio. If you watch closely in the movie Back to the Future, in Marty McFly's bedroom, he's got an alarm clock radio that has the same basic idea for the clock part of it. And I think the movie Groundhog Day, the clock that he breaks many times in the movie, that keeps waking him up in the movie, has these flip numbers just like this. And eventually this brings me around to this Sangean alarm clock radio, which addresses many of the issues that we don't like about the older clock radios and gives us a few innovative new features that I haven't experienced yet on alarm clock radio. So you see all the buttons here, very simple to use, and it's actually pretty intuitive. These buttons here, numbered 1 through 7, are for your radio presets, radio stations, tuning up and down, and you also use the buttons on either end of this to set some of the alarm settings and some of those things, and menu, band to select AM or FM, and also to select some of the things when you're setting it up. Then here you can see this is to activate alarm number 1 and alarm number 2. It has 2 of those. It'll show you the time here. In case you're listening to a radio station, press this to see the time, or press this to see the date. So that's today's date and the year. It's all right there. This right here turns on or off the backlight, and you can set the dimmer for the backlight. I'll show you that in a second. This says info, and right now it's just giving you information about the time and date. But when the radio's on, this can give you info about the radio station you're listening to, a nap timer, and then just kind of an on-off for the radio. So very, very simple to operate. Now, one of the things I like about this alarm clock radio is that it has atomic time reception from WWVB. Now, there are some international versions of this radio that might be tuned into other atomic time transmitters from other parts of the world, but this one happens to be made for North America. So atomic clock, radio controlled. Here is an antenna just for that, and the antenna is actually removable to the extent that it has a wire that keeps it attached to the radio, but you can move this antenna itself around for better reception. This is just the antenna just for the atomic time reception. So, you got this little bit, you can extend that around. This antenna, this is an antenna here for the FM radio, so you can move that around as needed. And then, of course, this is for the AC power to plug it into the wall. So if I choose not to have this around somewhere, I can just kind of snap that back in place. Let's see, I guess it goes in this way, and then I rotate it, okay, and then it just stays there, and I can, have it just sit there. If I'm satisfied with the reception that I get for WWVB when I just leave this attached to the case. Now, just a note about this display on the front. This button here is a light button, so you go to dim or full brightness. When it's in the dimmer mode, there's actually a little knob down here you can twist, and it's a little bit difficult to turn, but let's see if I can turn this. As I turn that up, you see I can turn up the dimmer so that it's basically on bright all the time, so this brightness button doesn't really affect it that much, or I can turn it way down to where it's basically no backlight at all, or I can pick any setting in between. For now, I'm going to leave it on the, I'm going to leave the brightness up so you can see this display as I go. And maybe I'll start off by resetting this. I'll just use, something pointed to get into just a little hole here and push the reset button. And when I do that, there you go. And you see everything is lit up right there. And now the first thing it's going to ask me for is my time zone. Now in this case, I've already set it at the mountain time zone where I am. So I'm going to push this button marked band or select and say, yes, that's the time zone I want. And now it's going to start searching for the time using WWVB. It can also set itself to the time using the RDS system. So some radio stations, FM radio stations, they will broadcast data using something called RDS. And well, a lot of times that data is used to tell you the name of the artist or the name of the radio station, stuff like that while you're listening. And people are kind of used to that now in cars. They can also use RDS to broadcast the time of day. And if you have the right kind of receiver, it can pick that up and set itself to the RDS. Now, I did a little quick search of the radio stations where I am in northern Utah, and I couldn't find any. I mean, I just kind of glanced at the list. Most of them did not, and even nationwide, most stations do not choose to broadcast time data as part of RDS. But if they do, if you've got a station that'll do it where you are, you could have it set the time according to RDS coming from the radio station that you're listening to, or again, WWVB, or just manual. So maybe, if I press and hold this time button, it will allow me to go into the manual setting right here. And so I'm just going to do that real quick. And the actual time here, so 2 p.m., I'm going to hit select there. And now it'll allow me to set the minutes. And again, I can go up or down with these buttons here. So the actual time right now is 2:24. And if I do that, then I've already set the time, but it will try to use WWVB the next opportunity to set itself. It will try every hour to set itself, and then once it has successfully set itself, it will try again every other hour. It will just double check itself, and that's how it works, setting itself to WWVB. So as you know, if you've watched my other videos, I'm a big fan of multiband 6 and some of these services where a clock or a watch will set itself to the right time automatically because of a WWVB receiver built in. So that's one of the things that attracted me to this radio, because Sangean makes a lot of different radios. They don't all have atomic time reception to set themselves. Sangean is very well known for having very good radio receivers. So in my experience, this one lives up to that reputation. So, they've got portable radios and tabletop radios and all kinds of different things, HD radio, a lot of stuff. But this one happened to be one that was a fairly reasonable price, that had all the great clock radio functions and alarm clock functions with the WWVB reception built in. And some people really like to have a WWVB capable clock radio that they can also plug into the wall for convenience to keep it running. Incidentally, if I also wanted to manually set the date while I'm waiting for it to receive that from WWVB, I can just press and hold this button right here, and I can start adjusting the date as well. Again, hit select, and I say, well, actually it's August 3rd today, and it is Monday. So there, I've set the time and date manually already. Now this clock does have a built-in backup battery, so if you lose power, it will come back on and save your alarm and time information. But like the other one, if the power happens to go out, and it's out during the time in which the alarm is supposed to go off, the alarm will not sound. So that is one drawback here, but it does have the built-in battery, so you don't have to worry. If it's unplugged for many, many hours, it'll drain that internal battery and you will have to start over again. However, for most of us, if a power failure lasts, a few minutes or maybe a couple hours, it should be just fine for it to come right back on, retaining your time and your alarm setting information, and also your radio station presets. Now, unfortunately, when I was a kid, we lived in places in the suburbs where there were a lot of radio stations that I could listen to as a kid. And today, I actually live out in the country where there aren't that many radio stations that I can receive very clearly, especially with FM. So, to get a great radio receiver like this and not have a lot of great radio stations to listen to is kind of silly, but it is a great radio, especially AM comes in pretty well with this. So if you want to turn on the radio, all you do, this is the power button right there, and that turns on the radio. I could either scan for a new station by holding down this plus or minus button, and it'll scan around until it finds a station to listen to. So that was just hitting the plus side of the snooze bar to look for a station, or I could hit the minus side and it would scan the other way looking for a radio station. It'll stop and it will find one. Now I could change the band to AM by pushing this button that says band. So now I'm listening to an AM station. And again, I've got some presets here. Oh, actually, okay, it did save the presets when I reset everything. So those are kind of some of the preset stations I have in my area for AM. And again, I can scan to search for a station using that feature there. Or if I just tap this, I can just tune in right to where I need to be for a radio station that I want to listen to. Now, when I was a kid, the radios that we had, the clock radios, didn't have digital tuning for the AM or FM radio stations. You had analog tuning. So, I'd have a little dial here I'd use to dial in the station. And if you weren't on there exactly right, the station would come in, not too clearly. You'd have to really be precise about that. And the other thing was, if you just by accident, happened to knock it just out of tune just a little bit, maybe when the radio comes on you wouldn't hear anything because it's not tuned in just right. So analog tuning, it was good in its day, but boy, I prefer digital tuning on a radio station these days. and that's something that I really like about the Sangean alarm clock radio. And now I know I'm really showing my age when I talk about listening to the radio, over-the-air radio. Kids these days, they're using streaming from the internet. But if I wanted to, I could even take my streaming device, and if I have, a little 3.5 millimeter, cord, I can plug that into this auxiliary input on here. And then when I go to select my band, one of the options is auxiliary in. So then I can take my device here that's going to play something else besides the radio, and the sound from this will come out of this speaker. And there's a volume control over here on this side, so I can turn that up and listen. Hi again, everybody. My name is Greg Anderson, and this is the Good Timekeeping Show with Greg Anderson. Today's dilemma. So that way, depending on the device you're using, this one has a built-in speaker. I don't need to really do that, but depending on the device I have the ability to play the sound right out of this speaker. And then that way, it can also take advantage of things like a sleep timer. So this will automatically shut off after a certain amount of time. And again, I realize for a lot of the young people, they're maybe using their phone to stream music from streaming services rather than listen to the radio. They're also using their phones as alarm clocks. So maybe this thing is just not for them. But for me, there's a lot of great things I like about this. Like, for example, when you want to have a sleep timer go, like let's say you want to listen to the radio, but you want it to automatically turn off because you feel like you're going to fall asleep while listening. It's actually very easy to set the sleep timer. You just push this button here and hold it down, this power button. And when you hold it down, by default, it's going to start at 60 minutes and then go down by 15-minute increments. And what you do here is just hold it until it reaches the amount of time that you'd like it to keep going. So if you only want 15 minutes, then let go. And 15 minutes later, the radio is going to turn itself off. You can use the volume button over here to turn it to whatever volume you want it to be until it turns off. And if you want to interrupt that and turn it off immediately, just again push this power button up there to turn it off. But as you see, when I hold it down, it'll start at 60. It goes down, and then once it gets to 15, then it goes to 120. So you could have it stay on for 2 hours and then turn itself off. So pretty easy to make that happen. Also, you notice this button says nap. So it's a nap timer. Let's say you want to take a nap and you don't want to have to, set an alarm, use one of your regular alarms, but you say, I just want to take a nap. If you press this nap button down, then 30 minutes or well, you can set that to something else using this button up here. So if I, again, hit, and it'll go, yeah, it'll go in whatever increments you want, down to, you know, just a 1-minute nap, or as much as a 120-minute nap. So what that does is now, right now, it's like a temporary alarm that I've set for just one time. So 120 minutes from now, it's going to sound the buzzer to wake me up. So if I also hold down the nap button, then it's going to go in 5-minute increments to whatever I want it to be. And there's my nap, say 100 minutes. And so that's an easy way to set up for a nap. And if I wanted to, I could cancel that nap by just repeatedly pushing this button until it gets to, where would it be? Off. And so now it won't have the nap alarm anymore. By the way, over here, there's the auxiliary input jack, but there's also a headphone jack, so you can plug in a regular set of earbuds or a headphone in there, and instead of the speaker on top making the sound, it comes out of the earphones. And so in a way, you know, that's maybe not so useful if you need the alarm. You maybe don't want the alarm to come in through the earbuds or the headphones, but it's a nice way to, you know, have an alternative way of listening. You don't have to use the built-in speaker on top. I should note that even though on the front display, there is kind of an icon you can just barely see for the stereo reception. So FM stereo. I think that other versions of this for other countries might allow FM stereo reception, but this one actually doesn't have stereo reception on the FM. And that kind of makes sense since it only has one speaker on it. Also, then the headphones, it's a monophonic output. If you have stereo headphones, you will hear the same thing in both ears, but it will not be a true stereo listening experience. And now I've kind of been building up to what I really like is the versatility of these alarms. So there's 2 alarms here, and if I press and hold, say, alarm number 1 here, then it allows me to, you know, set my parameters for alarm number 1. So whatever time I want, let's say I want it to be, you know, 6:15. So I selected 6, then I pushed the select button to now set the minutes. So there we are, it's 6:15. Press select again, and it's asking me, do I want this alarm to go once, or just on the weekends, or weekdays, or every day, or just once? So it's kind of nice to have that versatility. So I'll select once for this. I can have it wake me to a buzzer, or to an AM radio station, or to an FM radio station. If I select buzzer, and then it allows me to select the volume. Do I want that to be kind of a quiet buzzer? And it kind of previews that, gives me the sound of how loud that's going to be. And I'll just select, say, 15, and there now it's set. And right here, alarm number 1, the icon shows that the alarm is set. And if I just tap this, then it'll tell me what my alarm setting is, and it's ready to go. Now, this has what they call a HWS, the Humane Waking System. So what happens is that alarm starts out at 0, and over the course of a few seconds will build up to the volume that I've told it to be. So that's kind of nice. Rather than waking you up to just one really loud, terrible sound, it will wake you up more gently. It does the same thing if you select a radio station. So if I hold down this alarm 1 button for a few seconds, then it will turn it off. Okay, so I'm going to activate it again with a little bit different setting. I'm going to say, okay, I still want it to be 6:15, so I'll select that. And I still want it to go once, okay. But instead of a buzzer, I'm going to select an AM radio station, and I'll select that. And let's make it be preset number 5, which is AM 1160. And again, I can select the volume. If I want it to be louder or softer when it wakes me up to that radio station, I select that, and now I'm ready to go. And my alarm is set to wake me up. Looks like I've somehow left the radio on, so I'll just hit that. And okay, the radio's off, but the alarm is set to wake me to that radio station at 6:15 in the morning. Now, this is where it's kind of fun because I can use the sleep timer if I do this here. You know, and say I want it to go off in half an hour, and I can select some other radio station. So it'll play this radio station for half an hour and then turn itself off as I fall asleep. And then it will wake me up to a different radio station at a different volume depending on what I've selected. So that's kind of nice. So if I like to fall asleep to quiet classical music and I like to wake up to loud local news, I can select different radio stations and different volumes very easily with this. And then, of course, you've got this second alarm, which is just as versatile. Now, let me just quickly show you what happens when I set it to a radio station that has that RDS. First of all, this appears in the display to show you that that data is part of the FM radio stream. If I push my info button here, then it tells me that's the frequency of the radio station, FM 88.7. This gives me some data about the format of the station, the song, the artist, all that, if I just keep pressing that info button. I know a lot of people already have that sort of thing on their car radio. Here you have it on your home radio as well. Now, even though I live in an area where there's not a lot of great reception of radio stations, I can report that I took this downtown to where I work, and I did get great radio reception on all kinds of FM radio stations in the basement of this building downtown. FM radio seems to work fine in some of these big industrial buildings, and so it was great. I was getting RDS on almost every station, and just great reception. And so I will report that, yes, they live up to their reputation as having great radio receivers. The AM didn't work so well in the basement of that big building, but out in the open, it works great as well. And that's typical of AM radio reception in downtown areas. So just want to make sure I made that clear. Okay, just to be thorough now, right here there's a menu button. So a few things you can set up that I haven't shown you just quite yet. If I hold down this menu button, of course, it's going to prompt me to set the time zone. If I hit select, then you can see I've got all the American time zones from Hawaii, Alaska, the continental U.S., and back again. So those are my time zones that I can select. Of course, I'm in the Mountain Time Zone. I press select again, and now I can select loudness. So it's just like the old-fashioned loudness control on your hi-fi. Gives you a little bit of boost in the bass and the treble if loudness is on, or you can also have loudness be off, of course. So select that off, on. Then daylight saving time, if I want that on or off, this is where I make that selection for off or plus 1 hour for daylight saving time. Now my snooze can be 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 15 or 20 minutes. So you got some versatility there. When you press snooze, when the alarm goes off, do you want it to just be 5 minutes or something else? So you've got those options. Next option would be, do I want it in 24-hour or 12-hour mode for the time? So I can select that, just very easily there. This is kind of, depending on where you are in the world, do you want the FM radio station tuning to go up by 100 kilohertz each time you press a button, or by 50? And then with AM, it's either 10 or 9. So for the United States, I just keep it at, the default 10 for AM and 100 for FM. Let's see. Then, I'll get back in here to my, okay. This is just telling me what version of the firmware is in there. There's nothing you can really do about that, but it just informs you of what it is. And here you can do a complete factory reset if for some reason you think the radio is acting a little bit buggy. Here it allows you to, manually set the date. Here it allows you to select whether or not you want WWVB to set the time, or that, radio station RDS to set the time, or if you want it to be completely manual time setting, I'm going to leave it on WWVB, and then we're back to the beginning where you select your time zone. So, wait, hang on, there is one more thing I do want to tell you about. What if the alarm goes off and you don't press any buttons to stop it or to snooze it or to do anything? What will it do? Well, if it's set to the buzzer, it will go for 1 minute, then it will turn off for 1 minute, then the buzzer will go again for 1 minute, then off, and it will just alternate 1 minute on, 1 minute off for an hour, and then it will stop. If you've got it set to the radio and you don't do anything to stop the alarm when the radio starts playing, it will play that radio station at the volume you have selected for 1 hour, and then it will stop. So I kind of like that. I mean, what if you have your favorite radio show and it comes on certain days, maybe every day, every weekday, whatever it is. You can set one of these alarms to be, the time that your favorite radio show starts and the radio station and the volume that you want. And then, it'll just automatically come on for an hour. So I think that's kind of a fun feature that you can actually use to your advantage if you want to. All right, so that's it for now. Thanks for watching this episode of The Good Timekeeping Show. This has been the Sangean RCR-22, and I like it. I recommend it if an alarm clock radio is your thing. Well, I'm going to make more episodes coming up real soon, so I hope you'll join me again for another episode right here on this YouTube channel.